This is the portfolio management process. The first step in the portfolio management process is deciding the asset allocation. Asset allocation is how to distribute investors' wealth into different asset classes for investment purposes. Asset allocation decision is very important investment decision. Professional investment experience has been suggesting that in the long run, asset allocation decision majorly influences the performance of the portfolio. It's not an isolated decision, it is a component of the portfolio management process. Second step is to understand the correlation when deciding on asset allocation. It is one of the most critical steps in deciding asset allocation because when the investments are correlated, the same and that are part of the same asset class is high, the correlation between two asset classes is correlation between the correlation between investments that are part of the same asset class is expected to be high. Whereas the correlation between two different asset classes will be low. So if two asset classes have a similar correlation, then the performance of those asset classes would move in tandem. Whereas in case of low correlation, the performance could move in the opposite direction. So therefore, it is most relevant factor in reducing the portfolio risk. Correlation between asset class returns can and do shift over time in different economic environments, and therefore it has to be continuously monitored and reviewed. Asset return correlations in the future may also differ from those observed in the past, and because of the changing economic regimes, and therefore you need to rework the correlation if it is required in the changed circumstances. What are the steps in the portfolio management process? The first step is development of a policy statement for the portfolio. It is a roadmap that identifies investors' risk appetite and defines investments, objectives, goals, and investment constraints. The second step is the study of current financial conditions and forecast future trends. The third step is based on the first two steps, construction of the portfolio for the investor. And the fourth step is perform evaluation and monitoring of the performance of the portfolio. Investment policy statement. Why do we need an IPS or an investment policy statement? Investment policy statement is basically a planning tool which helps investors understand their requirements and also help portfolio managers in creating and maintaining optimum portfolio for the investors. Constituents of the IPS. As it is the most important document, it has to be prepared with caution. The investment has to be upfront with this advisor or the portfolio manager with regard to financial situations, requirements, and the risk management and the risk-bearing temperament. Talking of investment objectives, investors' objectives are identified in relation to the risk, return, and liquidity. Investors may state their investment objectives in terms of desired return in absolute or relative sense. Risk or return have typically positive relationship. Higher the risk, higher the return. On the other hand, if the risk, there is investments require premium for low liquidity, and they are, and therefore they are inversely related. What are the constraints in investment? Constraints are limitations on investors to take exposure to certain investment opportunities. Constraints relates to investor liquidity needs, time horizon, and other unique needs and preferences. There could be also apart from liquidity constraints, there could also be regulatory constraints in terms of investments into certain asset classes or certain certain products. There could also be tax constraints when an investor looks at how much and based on the return expectation, what is the kind of tax is liable to pay, and therefore his decision would be based on that. Assessments of need and requirements of investors. Investors would have near-term high priority goals, or they could have long-term priority goals. And therefore, investments need to be, the portfolio manager's investments need to be aligned with the needs of the investor. Near-term high priority goals require investments in liquid and stable investments where like debt, mostly debt, and maybe in equity, where then you are looking at large caps, investments in large cap stocks. Whereas long-term priority goals would enable the portfolio manager to invest in long illiquid products also, which could be like equity, particularly small cap, mid cap, or even unlisted space, which could provide gains or would satisfy the long-term goals of the investor. Analyzing the financial position of the investor. I think that becomes a very important step in before you can form an investment policy statement, because the financial position will help to classify the investor into the kind of investment and which can be suitable for the investor. Analyze the psychographic analysis of the investor. The investor traits, depend, and personality characteristics also plays a very important role in setting the investor's risk profile. When we look at, if we classify the investors into different kind of categories, this is what is the analysis here. Adventurer, an adventurer person is who is willing to put all in one major bet and go for it, because they have the confidence. As far as they are concerned, it is a carefully considered decision, and therefore they are considered confident and impetuous. A celebrity, an investor in a celebrity quadrant is an investor who likes to be in the place where the action is. They are afraid of being left out. They really do not have any idea of their investments, but they would normally go with investment advisors, and they are the most difficult investors because of their own beliefs. And so these are, I think, this could be this bifurcation is important to remember, because this could be one of the questions in the test, where they give the classification, the qualities of an investor, and ask you to classify that investor. An individualist, these are people with degree of confidence about them, but they are also careful, methodical, and analytical. Individualists, do their own research, tend to avoid extreme volatility. They are often contrarian investors, because they do not sit back and think about where they want to go. They will go and invest, which makes good value sense. Guardian investors are basically people who are getting older and who are considering retirement. They approach, guardians are people who are cautiously trying to preserve their wealth and are not interested in volatility or excitement in like investments. A straight arrow investor is basically, this is the group of investors which is relatively balanced, composite of each of the other 4 investor types, and by implication a group willing to be exposed to medium risk. It is worth noting that each investor at times exhibits some characteristics or some personalities other than the normal one which he is used to. Moving on to the life cycle of investing. So this is how the life cycle of investment has been defined. The first is the accumulation phase. This is this is the phase when net worth is typically very small relative to liabilities. Investments are fewer and typically non-diversified. Goals may include children's education, a house, and if possible, investments for future financial independence. Consolidation phase. The consolidation phase is a mid or late career stage of a typical life cycle of a person. As a result, the stage is characterized by consolidation of investment portfolio. At this time, when the time horizon of retirement is still relatively long, investors may start looking for preservation. High capital gain investments are balanced with some lower risk assets. Spending phase. This is the period when living expenses are covered not from earned income, but from accumulated assets, such as investments and retirement corpus. Because of the heavy reliance on investments in this phase and unlikelihood of going back to work, the focus is on stability of investment portfolio. This is particularly in the retirement stage. The last is the gifting phase. This is when the person realizes that he or she has more assets than they will need for spending, and therefore they start making investments to leave a legacy or support a charitable cause, and that investments are basically diverted to such kind of asset classes. Forecasting the risk and return of various asset classes. Portfolio management is the process of integrating two sets of information. The first is the investment objectives, goals and requirements, personality type, phase of life cycle, as we discussed. The second set is required is the capital market forecast that establishes the expected risk return opportunities available to the investors. The various investment opportunities that are available to investors need to be listed, and their returns need to be forecasted, along with possibility of deviations in the future in those returns. Historical risk return on various asset classes provide good starting point to understand the relationship between risk and return and proceed to make forecast about the future return possibilities. Benchmarking of portfolio. As we discussed earlier, the investment policy statement needs to provide a framework of benchmarking the portfolio. Typically, if an investment is a large cap equity fund, usually the Nifty or the Sensex is the benchmark, so that it correctly represents, the portfolio correctly represents the performance of that asset class. If the investment is in mid cap names, it is benchmarked in the mid cap portfolio. If the investment is in debt funds, then an appropriate debt index is used to benchmark the portfolio. Asset allocation decision. An asset allocation decision, as we discussed at the beginning of the study, an asset allocation decision is a vital point in terms of deciding, what kind of investment is suitable for an investor based on the risk return appetite of the investor. This could be a strategic asset allocation decision, but there could be short-term tactical asset allocation decisions also to take advantage of the advantages of the opportunities that arrive in the short term. And therefore, despite a strategic asset allocation being a very long-term kind of an asset allocation, those can be changed or changed a little to accommodate the tactical asset allocation decisions. The asset allocation decision also needs to be, may require rebalancing of the portfolios, and rebalancing of portfolios has to, which may be required over a regular interval to take advantage of the tactical asset allocation decisions. The rebalancing of portfolio basically would require there would be an evaluation required to see whether the benefits of rebalancing of the portfolio is higher than the cost incurred in rebalancing of the portfolio. Cost could be transaction cost, cost related to changing the portfolio, stamp duty cost, brokerage cost, or even tax cost in terms of when you rebalance the portfolio. Even there could be taxation that could come into the picture.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.